In episode number 437 of the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, we cover Walter Hamada's interview on the future of DC movies.
We also have our monthly What's New on Netflix for January 2021.
And this week we have our review for Wonder Woman 1984.
All of this and so much more on today's show.
Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and so much more. I am your Emperor Palp Kelli.
And I am Mountain Battler Daniel.
You're battling mountains?
2020 was a fucking mountain, and we battled it, so
and
I among with everyone else. That's right.
So for those of you joining us for the very first time, welcome. The way we format the show is first we're going to cover some news. We have our Patreon shout-outs, our Brocat block, which is what happened with Daniel and I this week, and then we wrap it up with a comic book highlight, and this week, our review of Wonder Woman 1984.
Kicking off today's news with how the movie-making platform has been changing. The two giants, which are AT&T and Disney, have announced their major streaming projects and hybrid releases. We did cover the HBO Max stuff. We didn't really touch on the Disney, but all of you know what all of that is about. Well, Sony has since been presented with extra talent offers, and that's all thanks to their delay of projects till later this year.
We have a quote here from CEO Tony Vincent Chiera, who said, quote, "The real benefit has been the number of incoming calls from talent, creators, actors, and directors to us saying, we want to be doing business with you because we know you're a theatrical distributor and producer. That has worked very well for us." End quote.
And that was an interview with IndieWire. Sony currently is not planning on making any major changes in a post-COVID world, so that is them referencing the theatrical model. To them, that still exists. They're not going for any kind of streaming-only type of thing, and I think a lot of that is because they don't have that streaming platform like HBO Max or Disney Plus. Sure, they have the console market, but that really is not your major market. That's not something that's going to show up on the Roku devices that are in everyone's home.
Absolutely, and I do think they're playing that up and being like, oh, look, we're not doing this. Well, you kind of can't. You don't have an easy way to do it. So I understand, I give it another 6 months of this, and I think that they will be trying to look for another option. I wouldn't be surprised if they're already looking for another option right now to say, how can we continue these things in the world that we're in?
How many of these actors, producers, directors that are tied into the ticket sales, they're looking for other modes of getting their project out there? Do you think any of them will come back to these major studios, as you mentioned, maybe 6 months down the line, several years down the line? Or is this a permanent change and something that will hurt the major studios in the long run?
No, I definitely don't think so. I think right now, and they're saying they're getting all these phone calls. How many phone calls are they really getting, realistically? And yes, in the past, you have gotten that bonus tied to these different things. But right now, they're in a really great place where they could go to these different studios and say, hey, let me make this movie. And since you're also streaming it, this is what I want. I want X amount of bonus based off first week streaming, right? The numbers that come from that. Whatever. They have that flexibility. At the same time, yeah, they're jumping over to Sony, but realize that everything is on hold right now. So you are now sitting and waiting and hoping things will get back to normal. And that's great that you have that flexibility right now. But again, 6 months down the road, when Sony's still saying, yeah, we're not doing anything, you're not going to get a paycheck. And these big two are saying, we're just continually making movies. And yeah, maybe they don't have that bonus tied to ticket sales, but they're still making money right here and now. I think writing off the big two is just foolish on their part, for sure.
I'm glad IndieWire did come out with this because I never expected this to be some benefit for major studios out there. Yeah, you had the threats of lawsuits and we're no longer going to work with these companies. But I never put two and two together of now they're going to get a major flurry of phone calls from all kinds of people. And I should have seen it because it's happening in comics. You're seeing Publishers like Image, Boom, IDW, they're getting the major talents now that DC just lost from cutting so much of their editorial, cutting a bunch of their writers and a bunch of their artists. And if Disney does the same on the Marvel side, I'm not saying that's going to happen, and so far there's no signs of that happening, but it makes sense that there would suddenly be an influx of people going, hey, I'm free now. I have this project, I have this pitch for this independent comic, because let's face it, every writer, every artist has that project that they've been wanting to make, even if you've been working on Spider-Man or Batman for the last 10 years. They're saying, I'm a big name now, I'm a big draw, let's work together here.
Absolutely, but the difference there is these comic book companies are still creating comic books. What is Sony doing right now? Realistically, what are they doing? Everything is on hold until they get to a place where they can release these movies in theaters, and so they're probably not looking to invest money in these projects right now. So they could sit down with them and say, yes, when the market gets better, we will invest in this project. But who realistically knows? And I hope it's sooner rather than later. I hope in 6 months we're out of all of this. But is that really what's going to happen? And regardless, I do think the market has forever changed with how we release movies, just point blank. Yes, you're still going to get theatrical releases, and you and I will still go to those theatrical releases. But I think Wonder Woman is a great example of how you can make money theatrically and get really great numbers through your streaming service by doing a simultaneous release. And moving forward, Sony's holding out now. I think eventually they're going to be at that platform as well.
The market is absolutely changing, and I think it is going to continue to change into something that we wouldn't have recognized in a pre-COVID world. Not even this is probably what's going to happen in 20 years. I think it's happening much quicker than we expect, and I don't think theaters are going anywhere. But something else that has changed is how consumers interact with artists, directors. Today we have Twitter, almost a direct line to people who at least control these accounts for these major players in movies. But back in the day, through an interview with The Telegraph, director Richard Donner spoke about the threats he received many years ago over his Superman film.
He said, quote, "Then there were death threats after Superman came out when some took umbrage at the vague religious allegory of Superman's father, Jor-El, played by Marlon Brando, sending his only son to Earth. They threatened my life. One woman wrote a letter saying, 'How dare I compare Brando to God and Christopher Reeve to Jesus?' She said my blood would run in the streets. I guess you make a good movie, someone takes it as reality." End quote.
I'm glad that we were able to get Man of Steel in this era of films, because back then, those Jesus allegories are very heavy-handed than they were in the Richard Donner film. So I can only imagine the kind of extra hate that Zach would have received. I mean, even today, he does literally nothing, and people immediately send tons of tweets, write up these hate articles, and it's interesting how Richard Donner, over a plot point in the film that is inherent to the comics, it's not even something that he put together himself, still received that reaction from it.
Well, and I love her very Christian response of, "How dare you do this? Your blood will run in the streets. You're going to die."
Is that not what they did in the Crusades or something?
Yeah, probably, but that wasn't. But if you are living by Jesus's message of love everyone and judge no one, then she's not doing it.
She might be going for the bigger guy behind them, the actual God, the more vengeful one.
You're right. He is for sure. I think about that all the time, how social media has just kind of changed everything. I know we talk about it a lot on the show because I took all those social media classes. But definitely I remember like wanting to write fan mail to my favorite, movie stars or musical artists or different things like that. And you had to actually write it out. And then maybe they read it and then maybe they sent something back. They never sent anything. They never even got it. That went to their team.
And if you ever got something signed, as a person that would write it in, you'd hope that the actual person did sign it. But I mean, realistically, they probably have several people that just sign it for them.
For sure.
We also ended up getting some solid DC future movie news to help kick off the new year.
In a New York Times article, president of DC Films, Walter Hamada, spoke about the future of releasing DC movies.
He said, quote, The most expensive DC movies, up to 4 a year starting in 2022, are designed for release in theaters. Additional superhero films, 2 annually is the goal, perhaps focused on riskier characters like Batgirl and Static Shock, will arrive exclusively on HBO Max, the fledgling streaming service owned by Warner Media, end quote.
I think that's a pretty smart idea, right?
People had a fucking fit when he called Batgirl and Static Shock riskier characters. Those fan bases got mad and they're like, they're not riskier characters. Put them on the big screen.
Okay, so are those fan bases buying the comic books?
I will tell you for sure, we don't sell a shit ton of Batgirl and Static Shock comics.
All right, so what are they mad about?
They're comparing, for example, they're looking at Static Shock and they're saying, well, Black Lightning has a successful TV show and Black Panther, we just made a shit ton of money for Disney, so obviously we can have a billion-dollar film on the big screen starring a black character, but they're just looking at they're both black, therefore it can succeed, and there's a lot of factors here.
There's a lot of factors. There's the fan base. There's the fact that Black Panther was released by Disney and this is by DC, and for whatever reason, people are like, no, I'm not gonna like it, not support it. I do think Static Shock can be extremely successful, but I don't disagree with especially Batgirl coming off the heels of Harley Quinn and the whatever. Birds of Prey.
It was pretty much a Harley Quinn film. Those weren't the Birds of Prey.
Exactly. So coming off of the heels of that to say, yeah, maybe this is a little riskier than we thought it was. I get it. I don't disagree with it. I do genuinely believe that it's a smart move, and to see what they can do and how they can monetize it that way.
Instead of being upset over risky characters, that label at least, I would probably celebrate the fact that we're getting a Batgirl and Static Shock project in this age where 10 years ago, you couldn't even imagine anything like that happening. So you go there, you push it, and you view it many times on HBO Max or whatever platform they end up releasing it on. If they do a simultaneous theatrical release, then great. You support it in theaters as well. And that's how you tell them, so that for the next project, the next time they want to greenlight a character like Batgirl or Static Shock, then maybe they will give it an extra chance. But like you mentioned, with a movie like Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 1984, although we'll get to that later, but Shazam not doing these high box office numbers like BVS did, they have to pick and choose which ones they're going to budget heavy for and which ones they're going to release on the streaming service instead.
Absolutely. Again, in where we're going, I just think it's so smart to look ahead and say, how can we release these movies differently? Because 2020 has changed everything forever. It's not going to go back to the way that it was. And the sooner that people realize that and say, okay, what can we do with what we have right now? Yeah, anyway, I could go on about what the world is like and what it will potentially be like.
In October, actor Michael B. Jordan had joined on as a producer for Static Shock, and Joey Whedon walked away from the Batgirl film in February. I forgot what the reason was. We had covered it, but I don't care. I'm glad he's gone.
In the same article, it referenced the believed future of the Snyderverse.
The article said, quote, "At least for now, Mr. Snyder is not part of the new DC film's blueprint, with studio executives describing his HBO Max project as a storytelling cul-de-sac, a street that leads nowhere," end quote.
Now, let me tell you, only the richest communities have cul-de-sacs, so they need to just calm down.
A lot of that happened isn't that where everyone congregates, in the cul-de-sacs?
That is true. You do all hang out in the cul-de-sac.
And there was that cul-de-sac thing that they started trending on there.
Oh my God, you guys, I can't. A few days before the planned event, hashtag Restore the Snyderverse and hashtag Zack Snyder's Justice League trended on Twitter after this article dropped.
On New Year's Eve, hashtag Restore the Snyderverse trended with over 100,000 tweets, second to Happy New Year. That is fucking insane.
Amazing.
That is a trending event right there. I participated in the event, threw it up on Instagram, on Twitter, on Vero, and so did apparently the rest of the Snyder Cut movement, which I'm glad that this one did go extremely well. I don't know if it did as well as the Us United or if it completely eclipsed it. I think it did. Mm-hmm. But this message was clear of, we want more than Zack Snyder's Justice League. And anyone, I remember you and I were talking about that blogger that said, give a mouse a cookie.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been saying even before they even confirmed that we were going to get the Snyder Cut, we were saying we're not going to stop there, because if they greenlight this, then that means, yes, like we could say, and would be grateful for the actors getting the recognition that they wanted, the directors that, like Joss Whedon, getting what is coming and what he needed to get, and so far he's there. We're going to talk about Walter Hamada and what Ray Fisher was saying, but doing right by Zack Snyder and the rest of the crew and everyone that worked on the project, that on its own makes it worth it. And the AFSP goals and the lives that have been saved through that makes it worth it. But when you get that project and you have it done, you're not AT&T and saying we're going to put millions of dollars into just finishing off this project unless you feel that there's a future to it.
Absolutely. And those things, getting these different hashtags trending, are things that they're looking at, and things that happen to get to where we are today. So I would definitely, keep pushing for anything that you're very passionate about. Always. Again, social media has opened up this great place to have your voice heard all the time by so many different people. And I don't know if you've noticed, most customer service is through Twitter now. If you need to get a hold of a company, you send them a direct message and they respond to you like within 24 hours. Like, it's crazy. There's no more calling on the phone. I hate calling on the phone. I hate when people call me on the phone. I'm like, why are you calling me? Just text me. But definitely keep pushing. And I hope that AT&T continues with Zach's vision and say, yes, let's put more money into it. This is what the people want.
A lot of people were criticizing this article because it made that type of guess or summary from Walter's interview of, they're writing in there and they're saying they're thinking that this leads nowhere. But meanwhile, someone else did a very similar article on Forbes and got fired over it, yet one got fired and the other did not. And there's obviously two very different narratives there, one anti-Snyder and one pro-Snyder. So we're thinking that there's obviously some politics at work there.
There's always politics.
Some have been saying that this is a hit piece right after the release of Wonder Woman 1984. I don't know if they want me to name them, so I'm just going to keep it anonymous. But, I did speak with someone recently in the movement, and they said that a part of Zack Snyder pushing Wonder Woman 1984, part of the agreement, was tied into the fact that, he obviously produced the film, but that it helps his project as it's coming up in March, and that they released this hit piece, and that in itself might have been like something to discourage Zach a little bit, at least his project, because it is coming up so soon. But I think it's instead having the opposite effect, where all of us come out and we do these trending events and we come together against this narrative because we know better by now. We know that this is something that we have to fight early on. Otherwise, it does become the narrative.
I'm so ready for the HBO special about Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's going to be great.
And I love all the comments of just release it already so we can stop hearing about it. And I'm thinking, this is just a start.
Y'all don't even know what you're asking for.
Until Zach tells everyone, no, stop. There is no future. I think that's when all of us would say, all right, well, if he says there's no future, he doesn't want to do any more, then we will stop. But we're getting the opposite messages on Vero, with him liking posts on Vero that say, we need to laugh at these bloggers, writers that are saying that there's no future to the Snyderverse. And when he's liking posts like that, that tells us to keep going. That tells us that there's more than a chance that we're going to get that completed 5-film arc.
Well, beyond that, that's what bloggers were saying forever. There is no Snyder Cut. There was no completed movie, and y'all laughed at him then, and now here you are. So I agree until Snyder is like, that'll do, pig. Just like Babe, until he says that. Yeah. Keep pushing, keep doing it in a respectful way, right? But keep pushing and being vocal for what you want.
I briefly mentioned Ray Fisher, and this is the latest story on what we need to do for accountability over entertainment, his dedication to accountability, and he went public fully with not wanting to do any projects under Walter Hamada.
Fisher said this in a tweet linked to the recent New York Times profile on Hamada. Quote, Walter Hamada is the most dangerous kind of enabler. His lies and WBPR's failed September 4th hit piece sought to undermine the very real issue of the Justice League investigation. I will not participate in any production associated with him, end quote.
People speculate that Ray is either resigning his role of Cyborg or he's trying to push for further action up the chain of command. I think a lot of this is going to depend on, and this is not something that Ray is hoping for, I don't think. I think he just wants accountability over entertainment. He is not concerned over his career. That much is clear because he wouldn't have done this from, many months ago we didn't even have a promise of Zack Snyder's Justice League. But I'm saying that if and when this ends up becoming huge and it does great numbers in theaters and for HBO Max, this Justice League movie, when they then move forward, or if there's already plans of, all right, let's do Justice League 2 and 3, what kind of agreements and contracts do we need to put forward to make this happen? If Zack has that leverage, he will look out for Ray Fisher, just as he has looked out for the rest of the crew that worked on the film. And that's, I think, when we can then push to maybe remove or at least bring some closure or some consequences to people like Walter Hamada. And once again, the question has come up of, we need specifics. What exactly did he do? And the fact that there's already action against Joss, and you and I, the public, don't know what those specifics are, but AT&T does, Warner Brothers does, and they ran an investigation and they took action. They know. Obviously, something happened. He's no longer involved. Now it's moving on to Jeff Johns, and it's continuing up the ladder. There is action already. You and I, we don't need to know those details because we're not, at the end of the day, we don't make those decisions. It's not our company. It's AT&T and Warner Brothers, and it's between them. But like he said, until he makes a public push, they don't move their feet. So when he does it, that's when they start looking into these investigations. And many years down the line, I think we will know those specifics. But more importantly, stuff is getting done. Action is being taken against the right people. And right now, it sounds like Walter needs to be one of those too.
To your point, we aren't going to get any solid information until 100% of everything is settled, because you're not going to release that information publicly, potentially get that information into the hands of the people that you're still investigating and give them time to do anything about it. So they're going to keep it under wraps. I do think that one day we'll get the full entire story and know everything that happened, piece by piece once action has been taken. But yeah, you're going to start with one and be like, okay, we are taking action, but you don't need to know what it is. So patience is a virtue. We don't need to be very vocal about needing to know these things. It could, if we knew those things, like I said, it could potentially hinder what else could be done, what other action could be taken against different people, and uncovering all those different people.
Do you think that this means that, I'm going to say, when we get Justice League 2 and 3, and Cyborg is obviously a huge part of those films, it'll be apart from Walter Hamada's DC Films division? Do you think it'll be maybe just straight up under HBO Max, which is, I don't think it is a part of Walter Hamada's control. I think it's a separate portion. I think we had said John Berg was overseeing it or had gotten promoted, but it might be apart from Walter.
When we do get these, regardless of who it's under, I do think it's going to be under HBO Max, or whoever has control, Walter Hamada or not. I do think it's definitely going to be HBO Max, because it doesn't sound like DC, the DC films are really on board with it and pushing it forward. Like they said, it's a cul-de-sac. Okay, so get investment from the company or the division that understands and really cares and supports and promotes these kind of things. So I do definitely think HBO Max will take the reins from here, and I hope they run with it, and we're going to get part 2 and we're going to get part 3, and we're going to get maybe break off shows, kind of like they did with Watchmen, which I thought was fantastic and a great way to handle those characters. And I think they could do the same with the same universe and just continue it from there for sure. The unfortunate thing is Cyborg is probably one of the more easy characters to replace the actor for, which really sucks. And I hope, and I don't think Snyder would go that route. I think he would just rewrite. But of all the Justice League, who would be easiest to replace the actor for? Of course, Cyborg, right? Because he's half cyborg. Well, he just transfers his intelligence into somebody else.
You mean literally, but I think when we get Zack Snyder's movie, And he already said that he's literally the heart of the film.
Right.
I think that's going to change, and that's going to make it more difficult to do any kind of recasting. And honestly, I think the fan base wouldn't have it either way. We don't want to recast. We don't want him written. And I don't think Zack wants that either. I think he wants his original vision, Justice League 2 and 3. And that's one thing that people were saying, like, just recast him. It's like, that's not going to happen. And also how quickly they go to just recast him instead of, wait, what is happening? What did Walter do? How was he an enabler? They're not asking the right questions. They're instead like, well, they're still against Ray Fisher and they want him gone, and they're not giving him the benefit of the doubt in spite of already action being taken against Joss Whedon. So I think that's out of the question, and I think all of us would be on board with if we can't get Ray Fisher, and if they want to instead recast, we don't want that film. We want the one that Zack wants to make.
We want Ray Fisher or no one at all.
Exactly right. Exactly right. All or nothing. You got to do this right.
I hope they continue to come to a resolution. I hope that Walter Hamada is not part of HBO Max and what they're doing so that we can continue to get Ray Fisher, because I did really enjoy him as Cyborg. Again, I'm fully on board with you that Zack wouldn't be supportive of recasting. He would just find some way to not have Cyborg in the film and completely rewrite or change or do whatever they needed to do in that instance.
And what's crazy, too, is we haven't really seen him as Cyborg yet. He has already come out saying that the rooftop scene with Gordon in Justice League is the only scene from the original cut that he used. Everything else, all the other scenes in there are Joss Whedon's or reshoots. And that tells me that we got one scene of Ray Fisher's Cyborg that we have actually witnessed. We haven't really seen his performance, and I can't wait to see it.
Soon enough, March is almost here.
After this Walter Hamada story and these tweets came out, Matt Reeves' interview came back up about how he was handled at Warner Brothers under Walter Hamada's regime, I guess. And he was brought on after the success of Shazam and Wonder Woman, and his mindset, and I think it was similar to Jeff Johns', was we have this success of Wonder Woman, we have the positive reviews with Shazam, why don't we keep moving in that direction of hope and optimism, which is obviously what ruined the Snyderverse. And that's what got us these movies like Birds of Prey, like Wonder Woman 1984, like Shazam and Aquaman and all of those. And he did say that, or not did I say Matt Reeves?
Yeah.
I meant Todd Phillips. I was just looking at all the Batman tweets that were coming out. And Phillips said that their movie was so low budget compared to these other DC films. He said $60 million was still a lot. It's still a high budget film, but when you compare it to these other things that they have, it's small budget for AT&T and Warner Brothers. So they were kind of under the radar. They didn't make a lot of noise. They were just kind of like, let's just make our movie and release it. And if it's not liked by anyone and no one sees it, it only cost them $60 million, which they would probably make back really quick. But that Hamada was never about making the Joker film, and they were very much against it. And I think that's where they got that story of they needed to split the profits, the ticket sales with another company because they didn't have any confidence in the film. And when it did over $1 billion, they still had to split those profits with that other company that they had split the cost of. So they ended up shooting themselves in the foot by not having confidence in the film itself. So that already tells you the lack of vision and control that Walter has of, it's not him that went, no, we're going to do this and we're going to make it happen. It's instead, he's just kind of fumbling about and falling upward. Although now you're kind of seeing that these performances of these latest movies are not what they were back when we started this current line of films after BVS.
Absolutely. I really foresee that they're going to look back and just be like, oh man, this was a stupid decision to try and go this route, because at the end of the day, Marvel and DC are just very different, and trying to fit that mold of the Marvel is just, you're not bringing those fans over because they're going, DC anyway, and you just alienated the great, strong fans that you did have.
And we will talk about Wonder Woman 1984 and how this was another project in which they failed to please those reviewers and bloggers, even though they produced the product that they've been asking for. But first, let's close off the news section with what's new on Netflix, our January 2021 highlights.
This is not the full list. Again, just what pertains to Daniel and myself, what we enjoy, what we think you will enjoy.
First one on this list is Catch Me If You Can, starring Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Never seen it.
I saw it back when it came out in theaters, and I haven't seen it since, but I feel like it's worth a revisit, so I do want to catch it again.
Next, we have Cobra Kai Season 3.
For those of you that did enjoy the first couple of seasons, and I hear some positive things, but you and I ended up falling out of it. Mm-hmm. Another one by Leonardo DiCaprio is The Departed.
No, you didn't say that right.
The Departed.
Thank you.
Directed by the great Martin Scorsese.
I always read it that way now, The Departed.
Here's one starring Liam Neeson, Unknown, from 2011.
Which one's that? Who did he kill? Who was he trying to save?
I believe this is the one where someone stole his identity, but he was never married to his wife. It was someone else, and they're like, I don't know you, and he has to figure out who took his identity. Am I really the man I think I am?
Shit, I haven't seen that one. I'm so ready.
It's not action-packed, just a heads up.
Is it Liam Neeson, like, trying to figure out what happened and shoots somebody?
I don't know if he shoots anyone, but he runs away a lot.
All right, well, I gotta watch it. We also have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
And that's the one that starred Daniel Craig. Mm-hmm. And it was like within a year or two of his last Bond film. And I saw this one. So in my mind, I was still like, why isn't he kicking these guys' asses? How's he getting kidnapped?
You're telling me Daniel Craig kicks no ass in this movie?
Not really at all. From what I remember, he's an author, or an investigator. And
he's kicking ass with his words then. We just can't see it.
Probably. Or it cost more if you had him do any kind of stunt work.
Probably.
I haven't seen the first season of Disenchantment, and I've wanted to, but part 3 is also joining Netflix. This is the same creators of The Simpsons.
Is it also animated?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they look like Simpsons characters. It's that same design.
That's awesome. We'll have to check it out. Next on the list, we have Hook.
Rufio. Starring the late Robin Williams.
I loved Hook. This was one of my favorite movies when I was younger, and I still think it holds up pretty well all these years later.
Is that a Christmas movie?
No, it doesn't take place over during Christmas. It's just snowy outside.
I don't know why I thought it did.
I mean, maybe they're leading up to Christmas and he's got this time off. I do think there's a Christmas tree in there somewhere, but it doesn't take place on Christmas. So no, not a Christmas movie.
Last highlight we have this week is Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Season 2.
Yeah.
A kids show based on the Jurassic Park movies. Perfect. Where people get eaten alive and hunted by raptors.
Sounds just like the right kind of kids show.
People like dinosaurs. Market that shit with Jurassic.
Well, that does wrap up our Netflix highlights for January 2021.
Next week, we'll have our HBO Max editions. Let's head into our thank yous for those of you who make all of this possible. It is our Patreon shoutouts of the week.
Our first shout out goes out to Bobby on Twitter at Cuban Slim.
Bobby gifted us the Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light Collector's Edition. I was not expecting this. It was one that he and I were trying to get back when it first came out, but it disappeared immediately. I'm assuming there were very few of these printed, but in some shape or form, because it is Bobby, and when it comes to an Amiibo or a Funko Pop or whatever it is, a console, he is able to eventually get it, and I know right now he's working on getting a PS5 for Scott.
Wow.
And he got really close at one point, but Best Buy blocked him because he was at his limit for how many consoles you can buy. But I think he will get it, and this is an amazing collector's edition. What do you think of it?
It is really, really cool. I know it's something that you were so excited for and really looking forward to, and absolutely not expecting it. You opened it, and you're like, what?
Thank you once again, Bobby, for the holiday gift. Next one on the list, we have John on Instagram at Johnny2Chips.
John shared a copy of his Star Wars Clone Wars #1. This is the first appearance of...
I want you to try to pronounce it. I'm curious how you're going to try to say it.
No, why are you going to make me do this?
Do it.
Ashoka Tano?
That's perfect.
Did I really do it right? No, what is it?
I'm going to say Ashoka Tano from now on.
That's perfect. How is it?
It's Ahsoka. It doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? But it's a popular fucking character. We're not big into Star Wars. It is Ahsoka Tano. But I like Ashoka Tano a lot more.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm glad.
We don't have Disney Plus. I'm not watching The Mandalorian, so I'm not and I didn't watch the Clone Wars cartoon. I don't have any attachment to the characters, but I know she is popular. I get enough customers that ask for the Funko Pop that just released, and they are sure to tell me every single week that a Mandalorian episode happens. They tell me what happens in the show, even though I tell them I have no interest in it, but they must tell someone, and sometimes I am those ears.
You should just be like, hey, don't spoil it. And then they won't tell you anything.
The problem is I don't lie about that. I'm not like, I'm still going to see it. No,
You don't tell them. You just be like, hey, I haven't seen it. Don't spoil it. There you go.
Well, that doesn't work either because sometimes they come in with the spoilers. Well, this happened. They told me about a character that shows up in the final episode, even though I was like, no, I haven't seen it. They're like, well, this happened. And I'm like, oh, well, if I had seen it, I would have probably, if I cared about that shit, I would have been pissed.
Right, for sure. Next up, we have Neil on Twitter at inmats68, on Instagram at inmats.photography.
His parish athletes are the Texas Association of Private and Parochial Schools Division I state champions for the second year in a row. Congratulations, Neil, and everyone involved in that division championship. I know Neil is definitely entrenched in the world of athletics. You can see it from his photography and from his Twitter. He is constantly championing his local athletes. So congratulations once again.
Our next shout out goes out to Brian on Twitter at MogoBrocat.
Brian, who picked up some very key Silver Age DC books. I will leave it up to him to share on the Collector's Corner if he wishes, but definitely another serious collection and another serious member of the Brocat Corps.
And our final shout out this week goes out to Kat on Instagram at Beechwood Photo.
Kat shared some great Christmas-themed couple and family photos. You got to see some of those.
I did. They were absolutely amazing. I loved them.
Especially if you are in the Georgia area, make sure to follow her Instagram at Beechwood Photo. And if you're looking for photography and you're in that area, consider Kat.
So thank you so much, Kat, Brian, Neil, John, and Bobby for your Patreon support.
If you too would like your shout out, head on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimebroke. And for as little as $1 a month, you too can get your shout out every single month.
Of course, we always say our podcast will always be free. The best thing you can do for us is interact with us on social media through Discord, but also let your friends know about us.
And if you're looking for some new clothes for 2021, kick it off with some brand new wardrobe wears. We have t-shirts, mugs, masks, everything available at thereasonsimbroke.com. Click on the pull down menu, click on merch, and it'll take you straight to our TeePublic curated shop.
But that does wrap up our Patreon shoutouts for the week. Now we can move into our comic book highlight as chosen by you.
Every Wednesday, we put up a poll celebrating our new comic book day pickups, and we put up a poll that leaves it up to you on what we cover each week. And this week, it was voted on The Witcher from Dark Horse Comics, issue 2. I think we had reviewed issue number 1, so this will be a nice continuation of that. This one is written by Bartosz Stybor with art by Ahmad Mir and colors by Hamidreza Sheikh.
I am so glad you took on those names.
What'd you think of the second issue from The Witcher?
I didn't like it quite as much as the first one. I felt that the first one had a lot of heart, and at the end of it, you were really like, oh my God, that was so stressful. This is definitely kind of like a filler issue. It's kind of progressing the story and leading up to the introduction of this new character, this mage that we're going to run into. I still enjoy it. I think there's a lot of mystery around this. I think it's a great, and my only experience with The Witcher is the Netflix show, but I think it very much fits in line with that of, you know, this is the kind of missions that he takes on where there's always some sort of emotional or personal element to these different things that he's facing, and he always responds in a way where he's respectful of that emotion. So he's seeing all these things going on, and he's like, it's not just point blank, I can't just go around killing these things because these things aren't really acting the way that they're supposed to. So unless it's in immediate self-defense, you know, he's trying to find a different way around it and really getting to the root cause of what's going on.
I'm on the same boat as you of the Henry Cavill starring show is the only exposure I have outside of from watching some gameplay video from the various video games that they've come out with. So to me, I do admire that this Witcher seems to be, from what I'm reading, not your typical Witcher in which he seems to get not emotionally involved, but he implements his own moral standings on his job. So instead of just saying, hey, we need you to get rid of these monsters, we'll pay you. And he wants to get paid and he loves that aspect of it. And that's very important to him. But then inevitably he ends up getting involved of, well, I'm figuring out that these people aren't really bad. So he chooses his moral convictions over the job many times. And from the show, from what we've seen there, he ends up kind of breaking even or still feeling right about the situation in the end.
Mhm.
But it is, as you mentioned, more of a mystery of, there's more involved, and how's the Witcher going to solve this one?
I think that lady's poisoning their food.
Did we mention that there might be spoilers? Because if you guessed it, I don't know if that's going to happen. That's
I
your
don't
theory
know.
right now.
That's
Obviously,
my
there's going to be
theory.
spoilers on this review, but there's always a deeper villain
Mhm.
behind these. If you've seen the episodes, and he got himself into some trouble in this one too, and that's because he did not walk the path that he was told to walk, and he instead started picking and prodding and figuring out other things. And I have been really liking this one, and I don't know if the previous miniseries are like this issue. I know there is an omnibus that they did release that collected all of the previous miniseries, and I may have to pick that up depending on how the rest of the series goes. But I think it is a solid addition to at least a companion to the show. I think if you like the show, I will still say it, the first issue and the second issue you will enjoy.
Absolutely. This Witcher does not look like Henry Cavill, but again, I still feel it's very much in the same line and theme and feeling of the show. So if you did enjoy the show, I definitely advise that you pick this up.
So huge thanks once again for voting in on The Witcher as this week's comic book highlight. It was pretty much a landslide vote for The Witcher, and I don't know if that has to do with us having a lot of Henry Cavill fans as followers, which doesn't surprise me at all with the kind of, DC Films support that we get on there. But I almost thought that Dark Knight's Metal was going to win, but not at all. Completely surprised.
No, because I voted this week, and I voted for the one that I wanted, and so of course it won, because I'm the Palpa.
Does Twitter just count yours as 18 votes?
You'll just about, 18 to 24,
Gotcha.
Somewhere in there.
That's not corrupt at all. You're like, no, it's just fair. I'm being accurately represented.
My importance is very accurately represented in these polls.
Do you want to do the Brocat block before we end it with our Wonder Woman 1984 review, just so that we can leave the spoiler-filled review as the very last thing?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
We are at the Brocat block, which is what Palpa, Kelli, and I have been doing this week, whether it's work-related or the more personal side of life, before we jump into the review. So how's your week been?
My week has been busy. The first half was very, very busy. I'm now on a 5-day, well-deserved vacation. We did have some plans to go out of town. It's not happening, but I said, you know what? I am still taking the time off. I need to rest. I need to recharge. It's been a wild holiday season for us, for sure. So I am enjoying that time. I discovered Netflix's Bridgerton, however it's pronounced. If any of you have a woman in your life or you yourself are watching it, or whoever, but it's
2021.
I've heard it described as Pride and Prejudice meets Gossip Girl, but spicier. I never watched Gossip Girl. I do like Pride and Prejudice, but it's essentially based off Regency romance novels. So it takes place in the let's have a ball where London's elite, etc., etc., etc. It captured my attention, and I just wasted a whole day just watching it. Just watch the whole thing, but it was amazing.
As far as my watch list, I do plan and hope to finish The Flight Attendant within the next week. I think we only have 3 or 4 episodes left. We instead got to see Wonder Woman twice. So we saw it once in theaters. We saw it again on HBO Max, just so we can really get our thoughts together for our review this week. I will not touch upon work this week. That's been a shit show. It hasn't been a good one for me, so I think I'll leave the Brocat block at that. Leo's been also testing my boundaries and patience and all of that, but that comes with the territory.
That's just raising a child. I will say he has turned into a very polite child and does say thank you for a lot of things. And I sneezed today and he said bless you in his own little baby voice. So
I like that.
it was very sweet, very polite. Anytime you hand him something, he says thank you.
All right, and with that out of the way, we can head into our final portion of this week's episode. In case you have not seen Wonder Woman 1984, that is going to be the rest of today. So that is your warning for our spoiler review that we're going to jump into this week. So if you are tuning out, we'll see you when you tune back in if you do. And Brocat Core, all will be well. But otherwise, onward with the latest from DC and HBO Max.
I'm not so keen on this one. I figure you are, but you know what? I'm ready to go.
I think we can do better.
Parachute pants?
As always, we do start with some facts and some trivia about the movie. So this is directed by Patty Jenkins, who did Monster, also the first Wonder Woman. It's written by Patty Jenkins, Jeff Johns from Aquaman, and Dave Callahan, who did Godzilla 2014. It stars Gal Gadot from Batman v Superman, Chris Pine from Star Trek, Kristen Wiig from Bridesmaids, and Pedro Pascal from Game of Thrones.
Couple of facts here. Hans Zimmer had stated that he retired from composing superhero films, but has since returned for X-Men Dark Phoenix and now Wonder Woman 1984. And initially, Emma Stone was offered the role of Barbara, but turned it down. And that's when Kristen Wiig was then offered the role, which was apparently Jenkins's first choice. Can you imagine Emma Stone as Cheetah?
I cannot. But that's also, and we'll get into Kristen Wiig's performance, but I think part of that is based off of her performance. According to Deadline, Wonder Woman 1984 has hit $85 million at the worldwide box office.
I know Warner Brothers and HBO have hailed this as a big success for them. It is the largest opening post-COVID for any movie, so that's something that you absolutely flag and throw up there. But I know some people are speculating, and I'm on that camp too, of this needed to be spun in a positive way regardless of performance by HBO Max and AT&T, because this is probably one of the biggest pushes to go to HBO Max, especially with the simultaneous theatrical releases. I do know that this did help theaters out a lot. Stock went way up for places like Cinemark and AMC after this performed.
I do definitely think it was smart to release it both in theaters and through streaming. I will say I enjoyed getting to go to the theater again. I think that was my favorite part of getting to see this movie, was that we could be in there. And the theater was more packed than we've seen it. In recent, we did see Tenet in theaters, and that was a ghost town. So definitely people going out to see this movie, wanting to get that experience, wanting to see it on the big screen, which was really encouraging to me for sure. And then to see the different things that theaters have in place, the different safety precautions within this, that they're saying, hey, look, this is still a great option.
A lot of theaters have celebrated in the success of Wonder Woman 1984 and how many people went out to theaters to watch it. Anyone that did feel safe, but anyone that did not, they also had record numbers on HBO Max for the number of people tuning into the service. So that is a very positive thing for fans of the service, for fans of movie theaters, which we both, I think, sit in both camps of we love HBO Max and we love going into theaters. But it's also obviously a positive for the future of theaters, other releases. I think this will help in giving studios that confidence to release more movies this year, but also for HBO Max and other HBO originals that are on the horizon.
Before we get into our thoughts on this movie, we do have some reactions from the comic industry.
First one comes from Peter David from The Incredible Hulk, who said, quote, "Am I the only person curious as to why in 4.5 hours of screen time in her own movies, the title character has yet to be addressed by anyone as Wonder Woman?" End quote. I don't know why that is such a popular tweet from comic book people. They said the same thing. Donny Cates was saying that with Superman and Man of Steel, and people quickly pointed out and found the clip in Man of Steel where they call him Superman, and he ended up blocking a bunch of people and then deleted the tweet, said, "You guys win," and then later on complained to Jimmy Palmiotti on, "All I did was tweet about how an opinion on a movie, and I got bombarded." And it's like you were just pointed out that you were wrong.
Right.
Someone just literally sent you the clip, and you blocked them for that. They didn't say anything in the body of the paragraph. So calm the fuck down. And I don't know why the comic industry is obsessed with that portion. And I'm just gonna say I'm glad that they're not in charge of the films, because those two things do not translate, as we've seen when Jeff Johns is in charge.
Well, the whole point of this movie too is that she's trying to hide her identity. She doesn't really want people to know that she's doing these things. So why would they be calling her Wonder Woman? Because she isn't out and about.
To me, it's a fucking ridiculous thing to criticize. We also have Colleen Doran, who said, quote, "I really enjoyed Wonder Woman 1984. I know some folks had issues with it, but by golly, I love that 1980s vibe. The story was very comic bookish and fun, a really nice distraction from our dark times," end quote.
It was comic bookish and fun, for sure. Next up, we have Dennis Bargler Jr., who said, quote, "Yep, there's the breakdown. Wonder Woman rapes a dude in this movie. Very problematic indeed, end quote.
That was pointed out by many people, including Film Gob, and they're not wrong. That does happen in this film, and I don't know why it wasn't written a way of why did he need to replace someone's body
right.
in this movie? Why couldn't he have just come back as a like the wish fucking says? Very weird, and I think it's just to set her up as like, oh, look, future romantic interest, but I think it was really unnecessary.
But if he's somebody else's consciousness, is it still?
Yes,
okay.
Because that's the weird thing. It was still his body, and they established that very clearly. It wasn't that Steve Trevor he replaced him. Like, it wasn't that he replaced the guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was just in his body. And Gal said, and Wonder Woman says, well, I see you. I don't see you. I only see you. Yeah.
Right.
So it's really fucking bizarre, and they're not wrong on there. So let's go into our thoughts on the movie. We're not going to summarize the film because more than likely you've already seen it, and that's just a waste of time. But instead, let's talk about what we thought about first the story, the screenplay and set up by Jeff Johns and Patty Jenkins, and how this takes place many years after the first one, but many years before BVS.
I definitely did not feel that this story had as much heart as the first one. I think, and I liked the opening scene better the second time around with when they're on Themyscira and she's learning that story or that lesson as a child, and it sets it up very well of I wish I had listened to these lessons, but they never really circled back to it. And you can kind of piece together and say, oh yeah, she did learn the lesson of not taking shortcuts eventually, but we as an audience had to piece that together. It wasn't really a very defining moment for it. So I feel, especially compared to the first one, which is unfortunately what everybody's going to do is compare it to that first one. They tried very hard to make jokes. There were a lot of holes in the story that I looked at and I'm like, really? A lot of places where it felt political or pushing an agenda or trying to get us to like a character for certain reasons rather than let us do that naturally.
I'm glad you brought up the comparison to the first one because that's something that I think you and I try to do of let's review it independently as its own standalone film, but this one does not stand on its own, unfortunately. Not like the first one. And a lot of that is because they relied so much on the plot of the first film.
Correct.
That there's no way it's impossible to not make those connections or comparisons. So with that in mind, we are going to make those comparisons of, look, this is a Wonder Woman film that, as you said, does not have that heart in it, and that reunion between Steve and Diana I felt lacking a little bit. I did like seeing him back because his character and his performance, I think Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, Pedro Pascal, those performances shine so brightly in this film, in spite of the story, in spite of the camera work, the directing, all of that, the action. They were amazing in this. So I was happy to see Chris Pine back. It's almost as if he picked up right from the first film. Yeah, there was a little bit more humor injected in there, but I did not feel that his performance was cringy. It was more like, yeah, he's doing what he's told, he's doing what the character is, and I think he's doing it as best as he can. And to me, none of that was negative as I was watching it. And it was like revisiting old friends, seeing Diana and Steve back together and interacting. But part of that story is that Diana was never able to move on from Steve. That romance was incredibly intense. And the way that she did say goodbye to Steve in that manner of him sacrificing himself for the world and seeing them back together, it's like, yeah, that's beautiful and that's awesome, but I did not feel that as heavily as I did in the first film.
For sure. And I think part of the thing that pulled me out of the story so much was the fact that it's been 50 years and she still hasn't moved on. And her entire life revolves around this one great love that she knew for 3 days. That, granted he's an amazing man and it was an amazing story and it was wonderful to see that love story. And I did really enjoy that one scene that we got of her where she's talking to him and she's like, this is just the one thing that I want. This is the only thing that I want. I sacrifice myself every day. It's not fair that I can't have this one thing that I want. And I did really enjoy that piece of it. And I understand that it had to be set up in the way that it was with him coming back and her pining, Chris pining, after him for all these years for us to get to that moment. But at the same time, I was just like, Diana, it's been 50 years. Like, I get that he died in this horrible way and you wish he hadn't. And he showed you all these, great, amazing things and was very influential in your growth to this point. But again, Diana, like, come on.
Some people were pointing out that this is almost the same movie from the first one, but not done as well. So as you said, Steve is showing Diana the man's world, and in this one, she's showing him the future, and then so it's kind of like they were relying on that a little bit too much, and that was one of the criticisms of it. Instead of moving forward, they weren't doing that. And one of the things too that they repeated in this is in the first film, he sacrifices himself and that awakens her powers, her God powers that we see. And then in this one, as soon as she's able to let go of Steve again and he's gone again, that's when she learns how to fly. So they kind of repeated that. Now that scene was beautiful to me. I really liked the sequence. Yeah, it wasn't done perfectly right. And there were some parts that were like, all right, come on. But just that message of, she's learned more about herself through love, which I know a lot of people say is very central to Wonder Woman. There's some, shining spots in the movie, but overall, when you bring back Steve, it's more of like, okay, and now what? You know what I mean? It's like you celebrate that they're back together and it's like great, but that's not enough to me, at least.
There were just, for me, there were just a lot of small pieces. I felt, again, talking about how they tried to kind of push us to like Max Lord of, oh, look, he's got this small kid and he had a shitty childhood and you should feel sympathetic for him because of these things. And granted, I think the acting was absolutely fantastic for his character, but I didn't really feel for him. And maybe it was different because you're a father. I don't know if you perceived that relationship any differently, but I was just kind of like, I mean, you're still kind of a crappy guy. Like, you're not putting your kid first. You're not changing your mindset to say, how can I really be what's best for my kid? Because you're just yelling at him through the whole movie.
I didn't relate to him, unfortunately. And I think a lot of that too is, yes, he is a character that is trying to get more power, but it is not in the name of being a better father or for his child.
Right.
And you have the one scene where he's telling him, like, you're gonna not see me as a loser anymore. But we didn't have that established already. Like, or if the kid like really thinking that of his dad, it's instead him trying to, I think, get some justification for himself through his child. So that's the way I read it up until the very end when you see that flashback and it's like, oh, I see that's why that he's doing it. But I didn't feel for the character very much at all. And I don't think I related to him. The very final scene where he is reunited with his kid, it's played so genuinely by Pedro that I felt in that portion, and I did tear up, and I teared up the second time as well. So, and I think that's more testament to the guy's performance, rather than the story. The line is great from the kid of, you don't need to. I forgot what he says, but he's like, I already love you, Dad. You don't need to make me proud, and it's just done so well. And then his expression as he's hugging him, it's done perfectly fine. But that was the shining part of Maxwell's story. And yeah, I do like sympathetic villains. I think that's important for a story. And I like that. I know some people want a bad guy to just be bad. It's like, why can't we just get that? But to me, it's more interesting if you can feel for both sides. I think that tells me a more interesting story. And they aimed for that in the film, but unfortunately, the story did not serve that.
I think it would have been more impactful if maybe we got his background earlier in the movie. Like, he's sitting in his office and having this flashback to these things. And then you're like, oh, okay, so that's his motivation. Rather than us not connecting, waiting to the end to try to make that connection. It would have been more impactful if this whole time I'm like, I get what you're doing, Max, but this is not the right way to do it.
Another story point is Barbara Minerva, and while I did like the Cheetah character, and we'll talk about her performance, she wasn't really needed in the story, aside from having someone for Diana having someone that's protected by Maxwell, which you could have easily written off as, well, he can wish for protection or whatever, and it would have been fine. But I think it was more to get another character in there, and I'm glad we saw her, but it wasn't, she was there like, oh, I'm answering this phone call. Yeah, this is the research that I found. Okay, now I know. Great. And it was just not really a necessary plot point either. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. I thought, yes, we'll definitely talk about her acting, but to have I don't know, her story just didn't serve any point except to be like, no, I'm not going to do this. And then she did it anyway. So didn't really matter.
Diana's journey to accepting truth, I get that that's the message that we got from the beginning with the Themyscira, but it's just it's very messy. I don't know if it needed more rewrites or I don't know what it was, but it was too convenient as you're going from scene to scene of, oh, here's the tickets right here. Great, let's go there. Okay, now we're here. Oh, he just passed us on the road. Look,
right.
You know, it's just like, what the fuck?
We're in this plane that just had the keys in it, and you just know how to fly, and then all of a sudden I know how to turn it invisible.
Yeah, wait, that's the other fucking thing. Like, that perfectly summarizes it of like, oh, we need to get away. Well, I've been practicing this invisible thing because of my father and how it's like, come on. Everything was too convenient for the sake of needing to move the story along, and it just wasn't done with any effort, I don't think. It was more of, okay, well, let's flip. They need to get here, so we'll just write it to where this happens.
Right, or even like, it would be great to have a shot with them flying through fireworks. Suddenly, it's the 4th of July. Like, okay.
When she says that, of course, the 4th.
Yeah, and I was like, all right. You know what I thought would have been really cool is talking about Diana learning the truth and how her lasso runs on truth, et cetera, where she talks about, how she only sees Steve as Steve. In one scene where she has a lasso, or even when she wraps the lasso around to tell him about the armor that she mysteriously found that we don't know the story of, she sees him as the regular guy. And that would be the truth. And I think that would have been cooler in a different way to get you more invested of, okay, she realizes it's not really him, even though she's fooling herself, and this is all part of it anyway. I digress.
We had briefly talked about the criticism about the man's body being replaced. Do you think that was I think that was the payoff that they wanted of, look, at the very end of the film, she sees that guy that was in that body that Steve was in, and that means that she is able to, the character, every movie needs to have that character growth, right? And I think that was them trying to say, this is the character growth. She is able to move on. She sees him and is able to say, okay, maybe there is a chance at romance. Maybe not necessarily him, but someone out there. And I think that's what they were trying to do by having that plot point. But I did not feel it when I was watching it, which made that whole thing of him replacing the body completely unnecessary and brings up that problem of they're using his body without his consent.
Right. I think it would have been, I don't know, either have his body come back, which would have been weird, or have him all be in her head, and she's the only one that can see him and talk to him, but he's still there because she made that wish, right? And so he's still actively present in her mind all the time, but then because he really didn't do anything with any other character, and to, maybe he drove the car, but it would have been fine without that, and maybe he handcuffed himself to Max, but it didn't last long. It didn't do anything except to have those humorous points of, hey, we're trying on different clothes now, and I just learned this thing, and that was physically, and flying the plane, but physically that was the only thing he contributed to the story.
I know for the future of the movies, they want to go into present day for the third and final movie that she's saying in her trilogy of Wonder Woman movies. And do you think it needed to be in the 80s or at any particular time period?
I don't think it did. I guess I can see why they chose the 80s. There were a lot of colorful and fun things for her to do. And I guess it would be a little more easy and convenient to hide her true identity in, the 80s and knock out those security cameras so that you can't see that it's her. That mall scene that served no purpose also. But
that was terrible.
Yes. But no, I think they could have really picked any time period, and they went with that because, you're going to get people to relate to that. And they're going to say, I remember the 80s and when I wore things like that, and et cetera. You know what other scene had no purpose and I still didn't like it the second time
Which
around?
of the many?
When Barbara goes to the gym.
Right. Yeah, because she had just opened the fridge and ripped the door off.
Right.
And that is enough to tell the audience, okay, she's got superpowers. But then they do this like, look at these strong guys watching this smaller girl lift the thing. And
right.
That's a part of that. They needed to inject humor into so many of these parts of the movie. And none of it was MCU level, or at least the whole film as a whole wasn't on that level of like, oh shit, what the fuck are they doing? But it was still there.
Yeah.
They brightened it up, and the tone was what reviewers want. I think it wasted time.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe a lot of the scenes, is a wasted time. It didn't serve a purpose within this. It didn't really push anything along or make me feel like it was valuable, and really pulled away from those more tender, heartfelt moments.
The story as a whole, I don't think fits with what was set up, not even in the Snyderverse, but in the first Wonder Woman film, in which she's in the middle of war. She's beating up guys, killing guys left and right, and that's what Zack's vision of his Wonder Woman in his universe is, of if you want peace, get ready to fight. And he has said that's his Wonder Woman. That's on the inscription of her sword. But in this script, Patty had said in the past that it was, I forgot what she said, too violent or too something, where they wanted to get rid of the sword and the shield and instead only use the lasso of truth. And that to me told me this was a completely different Wonder Woman than what we've seen in the past.
You mean the spaghetti noodle of truth?
Yeah, and it didn't look any better. That was one of our criticisms from the first film. But here you really all right, it kind of looks like it was drawn after the fact. Really, really bizarre physics on it.
Anything else to say about the story before we move on?
Just that it's not my Diana. It's not the one that was written, and I think we can just say that if we don't want this to be a part of the canon or part of the story, as we've seen before, we don't have to have this or Shazam or any of these Aquaman or any of those movies be a part of the continuity that we were exposed to before. So it is a weaker story, unfortunately, and I think that's all there is to say about it. It's not overly complicated, and I think that's where our review sits on.
Next thing we can touch on is the acting.
So Gal Gadot's performance, I think, there were some takes and some lines that I think could have been delivered a little bit better, especially when she first comes across Steve, and it's a very soft scene as opposed to an emotional one, which I don't know if that was the way they wanted to make the scene or if it was in Gal's performance. And that goes with Chris too, because I feel like they both should have embraced and cried, and there should have been a lot of joy and love in that scene, and we didn't get it. But with Gal Gadot herself, I don't know. I think that the scene in which she says goodbye to Steve was a strong one. And then, as you mentioned, maybe the one where she's talking about, why can't I have this one thing? Those were bright spots in the film. But overall, I think it's more of, I think we need to see a little bit better direction as far as her performance, or it didn't blow me away. I think it was a lot maybe like the first one. I don't know. It's nothing that's going to break any ground.
You know what it kind of felt like to me is she wasn't as passionate about this Wonder Woman as she was of the first one.
A little more phoned in.
Right, because I definitely believed in the first one that she was surprised or fascinated by all the things that were going on in man's world, that she was ready to go and fight and do what had to be done, whatever that meant, to save the world, because her whole mission was the betterment of the world. And so my kind of question is, in the last 50 years, where did Diana lose that fire of, I am, from Themyscira, this is my upbringing, this is all the things that I know, and I know that I have to do. And it was just kind of like, okay, I'm okay losing my powers if I can keep Steve. Like, that's not who Wonder Woman is. That's not who Diana is. There would be no excuses. There would be some kind of violent reaction to saying, why am I not strong anymore? Instead of just, oh, this is weird.
I did like Robin Wright's performance. She picked up right where she left off from the first film, but even that plot point, I know we're done with the story, but Diana's allowed to compete in this Amazonian giant competition, and she's training her right side by side, whereas in the first film she was training her in secret up until when she was a teen, and that's when the queen said, all right, fine, train her, make her the best. And it's like, but in this one she's now allowed to fight alongside adult women. It's like, what? It contradicts that whole thing. But I'm glad we got to see Queen Hippolyta and Robin Wright's character as well.
I will say one thing that I really enjoyed about the scene, and I don't know if you picked up on it, but until Diana's sitting on the ground, Robin Wright's character never bends down to her level as you would typically do with a child that you're mentoring. She stood right next to her, firm and tall, and essentially treated her like an adult and was like, okay, you're going to compete in this. And I thought that spoke very much to, Robin, I'm going to guess she chose to do that. That was one of her, I don't know, maybe she was directed that way, but very much to their relationship and how Robin treated her growing up, and like, no, you're not going to be coddled. This is what it is.
The two biggest performances that I think we should discuss are Pedro's and Kristen Wiig's, which I think were also the two bright spots, as well as Chris Pine's for the film. As villains, what were your thoughts on them?
I thought they did fantastic. Kristen Wiig especially, I felt for her and, was very entranced and felt that because, the whole point is the stone gives you what you want but takes away what's most important or most valuable to you. And I thought the way that she did that shift was very subtle and very realistic of, hey, I went from being, this nobody who's bright and sunny and great to everybody, and I'm slowly transitioning to this very powerful person who doesn't give a shit about anybody. And I thought the way that she showed that change was fantastic.
I definitely believed her as she was growing more confident and then more frustrated with that confidence and then not wanting the attention of the world and suddenly maybe regretting a little bit that parts of the wish, at least, even though she didn't want to give it up, she was responding very negatively to that extra attention that she was just receiving from everyone. It's kind of like the wish is overdoing what you actually asked for. So I liked her performance too as Cheetah finally at the very end. I don't know how much of that was motion capture or redubbed or whatever, but I felt like they filmed her expressions and then later went through and graphically did everything. I don't think there was like a suit or anything like that they later enhanced with CGI. Pedro as Maxwell is another one who you could just tell he was genuine about the character. Felt like he was having a good time playing this millionaire wish granting almost scumbag, in many ways, but not in a way of like, oh, this piece of shit. But I was still like, he's fun to watch, and we got so many scenes of him, and there was not one that I was like, oh, well, why'd you play it that way or whatever. I was just like, no, I get why, and yeah, it's not a very well written character, but I loved seeing his performance on there.
Yeah, I definitely felt when his body was like breaking down. I believed every single moment of that, of like, oh, blood's coming out of my ear, time to go. Like, oh, I'll just wish all this away, or when he's muttering to himself or different things like that. Yeah, very much believable. I was even watching our second time through, when Diana's speaking to the world conveniently through her lasso and helping them see the truth of him just screaming, and it was just so believable. And he was just there in a quiet room doing that, but so committed to that moment of this is what the character would actually be going through. And
tears going through when he's like, I finally have the world. And he's like, you see, he's about to practically cry in that scene. He put everything into that performance. And he probably was the best part of the film as far as all of the actors. And with Kristen, and Pedro, those were the three that I carried the entire film for me, at least.
Definitely agree. Fun fact, I don't know if this was intentional or trivia or whatever, but his son Alistair, it's actually, that name is of Greek origin, which means man's defender. So I thought that was fun. I looked it up because I was like, that's a weird fucking name to give a kid. Let me look it up. And so I don't know if that was intentional, but I thought it was pretty cool.
Another fact then too is he was in the Wonder Woman pilot that they filmed in the 2000s. He played a character in there, but that ended up being canceled. So now he's back in the world of Wonder Woman again, which was kind of cool.
Huh, that's cool.
Final thing we can cover on the review is the directing and the special effects. And we had talked about the Lasso of Truth didn't look great. We didn't get any sword and shield action, unfortunately. The stunt work, famously, she did not use Zack's stunt team from the first Wonder Woman or from his other films, and instead went with another team. And I think it showed in this film. There's a lot of wire work that is very blatant. It seems like there's no weight to any time they're up in the air. And I'm not talking about the flying portions, just literally them landing.
Jumping,
you can tell that there is a lot of wire work going on in the opening scene. And with the Amazonians, there's a lot of that you can tell they're on wires. And it's unfortunate, too, because that could have been something that overall made the film a super positive experience for us.
I will say when she's running too, anytime she was running to going fast, going after cars, I'm like, your feet are not touching anything point blank. There was no oomph behind it or no energy or anything like that. And that every time she ran, it kind of pulled me away from the moment.
And I thought it was done really cool in the first film when she's going through, like, remember when she's knocking out the Nazis in that rage? Like that feels real and realistic, even though she's moving at superhuman speed.
Right.
But here it's more like, here's my perfect summary of this. This is more like a tribute to the Wonder Woman show
Yes.
rather than the Wonder Woman film.
Absolutely.
They were trying to capture that audience and try to capture that world as opposed to the Snyderverse or the DC films or the comic books in many ways. And that was unfortunate because it did feel more like a TV show than it did a movie.
I definitely agree. A fun fact about that, Wonder Woman's Diana's clothes in this are very similar to what they wore in the Wonder Woman show too. They're side by sides where it's extremely similar.
And it might fit in under special effects, but the costume design in this, you can see many scenes in which her armor for the golden armor or the one that she wears, her normal suit, is bending in many ways of like, that's not protective at all. That is clearly just a suit. And this is the first movie that they've shown where her suit is compromised in that way of like when Steve is carrying her, the whole thing is bending and it's like she doesn't even really fit in the thing. Whereas in the other movies, it's on there. It feels like protection. It's a suit. It's cool. The gauntlets are there. It just wasn't filmed right. And I don't know if it's because of the lighting or they went cheaper on the suit. I have no idea, but it just didn't feel genuine to me.
No, I'm exactly the same way. There were just so many moments. I feel like, I thought the mascara was beautiful and looked beautiful, and I thought the mall felt like a green screen the whole time. I just did not like any portion of the mall scene. It just threw me off from the very beginning, and just, I don't know, different pieces where I was like, no, this just isn't, it doesn't look right.
You talked about the Themyscira scene, the Warriors wearing their suits. That looked really fake to me too. It looked like pajama one pieces. Whereas I think in the first film, they took the time to make like different portions to the different parts of the outfits as opposed to like a one piece, which I don't think fits with the world, once again, that they built in the first one, which is, I think, one of the weaker parts of that opening scene, which overall we both did like though. The flying scenes with Diana, the invisible jet, I don't think there was anything negative to the actual special effect on that end. What about Cheetah herself?
I thought she looked better than I thought she was going to. I don't know. That's a weird sentence.
It could have easily gone the cat's route.
Right. It could have looked really rough, but I did like the way she looked better than, I thought it was cool that she was like swinging on those like power lines where she's like, I can do this shit too. But then I was also like, why aren't you getting elected anyway? I digress. So I did, when she made that full transformation, like it a little bit more. I know there was some confusion for you. And I mean, I guess kind of me too, is yes, she's taking, she's being given these things from other people, but why does that turn her into a cheetah?
I think there was maybe one or two action scenes with Cheetah, like when she lands after they're swinging around, that looked a little rough, but the close-up shots of her and the shot of her like knocked out or electrocuted and they put her down, I thought it looked fine.
Right.
It wasn't at all like, all right, that's completely fake. I'm like, no, that's if you're going to do a CGI cheetah, but you superimpose those effects on Kristen Wiig, I thought they looked fine. The golden armor at times did look very much like she's not wearing a golden armor at all. And that's one part that it's like, all right, but she didn't wear it often. So whatever. It's also like, if she has her powers again, why was it necessary for her to wear the golden armor? I thought that was going to be a plot point of like, okay, she doesn't have her powers back yet, but she has the armor. That's going to help her. I don't know why it was really there in the end.
I don't know if it was because Cheetah essentially had the same powers that she did. So she's like, well, let me wear this and it'll give me an advantage. It also kind of goes back to, you could loosely tie it in with, well, the armor was worn the first time to save humanity, so I'm coming to save humanity again, so I need to, I don't know. I was also very upset that she had so many TVs in her room because she very obviously said, I don't have a TV. Like, make the line, I don't watch TV. Don't say I don't have a TV, or I'll stick with the TV I don't have, because Wonder Woman, you have 12 TVs.
And that was another convenient thing of when she looks on the monitor, oh, there he is. And he's driving through like, oh, what the fuck?
He just happens to be right there. Right.
Jesus Christ. All right. And directing itself, there was the one scene where she's laying down and she's talking to Barbara in the White House like, oh, this is terrible. Why, Barbara, this isn't you. I don't know. Like that shot did, and you've seen the memes on it, and the camera work, how you set up these characters was weaker than in the first film, unfortunately. And I don't know what else changed. I don't know if that has anything to do with the type of feel that Patty wanted for this film, but there were some scenes again that were very well shot, and like even though we found it was unnecessary, but the fireworks scene and they're above the clouds and when she's flying, there's some really good moments, but then there's the scenes like in the White House scene where it's like this action shot does not work well. Her just sitting there, laying there. It's not a good shot. Like, don't shoot her in that way. And I know you're trying to make her look weak, but I think from if you take a perspective of up to down, that shows a weaker position, and you could have shot it from maybe Cheetah's point of view, maybe over their shoulder. I don't know, just a different way than what they did of like, all right, lay there and we'll just shoot you right there. Like, no, that doesn't work for me. So
Right.
there was a lot of that took me out of it, where I'm thinking of that as I'm watching it. I don't know. There was nothing particularly special, I think, about the movie's directing.
One thing that I point out, and it's so small, but I did really enjoy it. Going back to that scene where she's just laying there, the cut on her chest perfectly lines up with her armor. I don't know if you noticed that. So for me, that took me to the place of, oh, okay, she's so weak, her armor is actually hurting her now too because of the way she was hit. It cut into her skin, and I thought that was cool, but they didn't do anything with it, so I guess it didn't matter.
Let's give our overall thoughts now that we've touched on the story, the acting, the directing. I don't know if you want to do any kind of ranking as far as where it sits on the DC film slates, but we can say I think we safely did not like it as much as Wonder Woman or BVS, Man of Steel. What are your overall concluding thoughts?
Yeah, definitely not high on my list of some of the DC movies that we've got. I'll even say that I probably preferred Aquaman and Shazam a little bit better, but I think that it was its own worst enemy in the sense that it relied so much on the first movie, and the first movie was so strong. So when I talk about that first movie of Wonder Woman, I continually go back to the no man's land scene, and there was not a single moment in this film that I felt reached that level, even came close to that level of, having that heart and who Diana is of, no, we're just going to go through and we're going to do what we have to do to get things done. I think it very much diminished the character of Wonder Woman and tried to make her more exactly like you said, like the old TV show, and included scenes that didn't need to be there and left out scenes that I felt really did to make it more impactful as a whole.
It is another victim of we need to change the direction of these movies to make them brighter, to make them funnier, hope and optimism. And it literally gave them what the reviewers wanted. And the reviewers have since panned the movie. They were criticizing it completely. And we as a fan base have been like, Warner Brothers, have you now learned your lesson?
Finally learned your lesson.
Even when you give them what they want, which you did with Justice League, they're still going to torpedo your projects because it's not Disney, because it's not Marvel. You get literally you checked off all your boxes for them. It's not grimdark. It's not what Man of Steel or BVS was. It's not even what the first film was. And you made it super bright and funny and positive, and you brought on Jeff Johns, who was supposed to make it like the other Marvel movies or whatever they're aiming to make. I have no idea what they're trying to do now, especially, but and they turned on you. And rightfully so. You deserve this. But at the same time, I'm also like, reviewers, fuck you guys. Once again, they gave you what you wanted and you're still torpedoing it. So don't listen to the fucking reviewers. And I know they're so important because people, as much as they say, I don't listen to reviewers either, you do. Everyone's influenced by reviewers. I saw it when this was coming out of people going, whoa, I've heard mixed things. It's like, I don't listen to reviewers though. Oh, me neither. That still unintentionally influences people's opinion of, oh, well, even though I don't listen and read reviews, I've heard bad things. So in their mind, they've already kind of set up some kind of expectation for the movie.
Speaking of torpedo, super fast, a scene where she rides a torpedo was not okay.
The missile,
That was not okay.
It was crazy.
Yeah. Anyway. Yes, all those thoughts, same as mine. Was not really a fan of this movie. I feel like I could sit down and rewrite something way better.
It made me want to watch the first film way more.
Correct.
And not in a good way. And it was like, all right, well,
I need to bleach my mind.
Yeah. I'd rather see that. I'd rather see Steve and Diana in that world again. And again, it was nice to see them. There are some positives here, but not enough to make me want to see this a third time. The only reason I saw this a second time was so that we can talk about it a little bit better on here and really formulate my thoughts and opinions on it. So there you go. That's everything for Wonder Woman 1984. We won't be seeing it again. I'm hoping that this is the last one that was written by Jeff Johns. I'm hoping that we get something like the first film for part 3 when that does come out. I'm happy that it was a success for HBO Max. And if you enjoyed this one, great. That's absolutely fantastic, and hopefully you're around for the third one when that comes out. But me personally, I can't wait to see the Diana that we saw in the first film, that we saw in BVS, when we see her in 3 months in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Sword and shield, the warrior that we saw and that we need.
Absolutely. Anything else to touch on before we move forward?
That, I think, does it for the review and today's episode, too.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in this and every single week, whether it's your 400th and whatever number that we're on or your very first episode. We are so happy that you stopped by to listen to us in 2021.
That's right. Here's to the new year of not just the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, but for everything else that we do enjoy. And we go in the hopefully upswing from what was 2020. But again, grateful that we're still here, healthy, and doing this show for you today. I've been Mountain Battler Daniel.
And I have been Emperor Palpa Kelli.
And Brocat Core.
All will be well.
Can we now end this by inserting the Beautiful Lie song from BVS like this one did? Unexpectedly in the end when she's talking to the world and Maxwell Lord and everyone else.
Is that a Beautiful Lie song?
That's a Beautiful Lie song from the opening scene of BVS.
Oh shit, I didn't even pick up on that. I was just waiting for the normal like dun 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 dun, dun like the Wonder Woman theme. It was not in there. Did not hear it once.
It's briefly in the desert scene.
Cool. Didn't hear it.
Yeah, they didn't really use it too much. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things of using the Beautiful Lie in this, because it's not the same, like, aside from the fact that the title somehow reflects what she's saying here of this is the truth.
Right.
And I don't know. But yeah, that was the same one of dun, 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 of little Bruce falling and then the bats bringing him back. Him remembering his parents' death when he's almost about to kill Clark. That's when you really hear it. And Hans decided to use it for this scene in Wonder Woman. I guess we could use it here too. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we're just using it wherever. So go ahead and insert that song.
No, I'll really insert that when we get a copyright strike.